I want to talk today about the absolute state of our statesmen, because I think there's an argument that this conflict wasn't necessarily inevitable. The airwaves are currently resounding with footage of explosions and scenes of heavy fighting from Ukraine. We might be tempted to ask ourselves, how did we get here? And we absolutely should, because that is a question the Western media is refusing to answer honestly. As I've been covering over at ukraineobservatory.org, which is this, the corporate media is now in full-on war mode. While I'm, of course, very much on the side of the Ukrainian people in this conflict, the biased and uncritical repetition of Ukrainian propaganda by the Western media is particularly concerning. As we saw from the last segment, like literal memes, literal meme magic, just, yep, that's true.
Samuel Hayati. I heard he's also leading the Chechens.
It's mad. So the Kremlin's continuing to issue these oblique threats of nuclear retaliation for NATO involvement in the war. And we should remember that our leaders are continuing to pour billions of dollars worth of modern weaponry into the conflict, and that is blowing up Russian soldiers. I've been covering a load of, for example, British NLAW anti-tank weapons, as well as man-pad missiles, which are anti-aircraft missiles, supplied by various NATO forces, have been having a real effect on the conflict. They're very effective weapons. And if anything, it's a testament to our military advisors that small shipment of 2,000 rifles, 2,000 anti-tank weapons, rather, has had such an impact on the conflict. It's almost as if they knew more about what would help an allied military than journalists on Twitter. Amazing.
No. You send memes. You change your profile to include a Ukrainian flag, and then Putin is destroyed.
Well, if only. But yeah, if this does go nuclear, and I don't think it will, there is a small but real chance, it will be Armageddon by proxy, because at the moment we're supplying all of the weapons that are blowing up a lot of Russian troops, and we don't have a single boot on the ground. It's like a dream scenario, as far as we can see. The latest move, however, by Twitter-addled Western politicians is the British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss directly encouraging British citizens to volunteer to fight in Ukraine.
You first?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they've got a flak jacket small enough, but maybe she can get there. Asked on BBC One's Sunday morning programme if she would support individuals from Britain going over to Ukraine to help in the fight, Ms Truss said, "I do support that, and of course that is something that people can make their own decisions about. The people of Ukraine are fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe, because that's what President Putin is challenging." Is anyone else getting flashbacks from the last 20 years of international politics, of British fighters going abroad to wreck other countries, places like Iraq and Syria?
Well, at least they won't come back and scream Allahu Akbar at a kid's concert. I'm hoping.
I'm hoping. You can't rule anything out at this point. But regardless of her politics, which, to be fair, do contain some actual conservative ideas, I mean, wasn't she the one who banned critical race training when she was Equality Secretary and so on?
Her and Kemi Badenoch.
Badenoch. So she has done some reasonable things, but the quality of our statesmen has been on a relentless decline over the past decades. Where we once produced titans like Gladstone, Wellington, Castlereagh, the best we can do now is apparently Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer and Liz Truss, and I blame social media. And let's look at her other tweet. This came up, I believe, yesterday. No, it's not that one. Anyway, she posted today, important meeting with G7. We are clear Putin must fail and sovereignty restored. We agreed to continue to supply defensive weapons and equipment to Ukraine, escalate sanctions to debilitate the Russian economy, and call out Putin in global fora. But viewers may recall Liz Truss heading over to Russia less than 2 weeks before the first shots were fired for negotiations with her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. She did not come home declaring peace in our time. Instead, she used the excursion for a photo op. If we go to that tweet we had up just now.
You scroll down to the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is her. She's got that photo op going there. She's wearing very warm, looks like black fur, maybe mink, who knows. Looking very toasty. But apparently it was a thaw, unlike when Thatcher went there and it was actually winter. So she must have been absolutely boiling in that. And yeah, and it's not the first time either, because she has form for this kind of thing, basically using the prospect of war and conflict as a photo opportunity. In December last year, Peter Hitchens reported on another Margaret Thatcher impersonation attempt, and this time she was perched inside a British tank in Estonia. Anyway, so she says, "You will have to forgive me if I laugh when people say that the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss resembled the Iron Lady when she clambered into a British tank in Estonia last week. Poor Miss Truss, despite the efforts of her official photographer, was engulfed by the warlike garments she had unwisely donned. Lefty liberals, such as she is, never look quite right in combat gear."
So the Hitchens impressions there.
I do love some of the ways he comes out with this. His brother was also very good at these very sort of snarky comments, takedowns. "The ugly helmet she was persuaded to wear makes her look as if a tortoise was nesting on her head. She looked much more like the failed US presidential candidate Michael Dukakis, who in 1988 unwisely rode on top of a US Army tank to try to look tough. Most people cackled at the sight." And I must say, I did have a bit of a cackle when I saw that. She looks like a kid who's got to ride on a school bus. You know, you get to ride up at the front and pretend you're driving. It's like, oh, look at this. Isn't this wonderful?
I mean, if I did it, I just want to do the whole thing with the sword, where you just pull out a sword and be like, get me closer. I want to hit them. Why not?
I don't think she's got quite the level of meme magic that you do, Callum.
Damn, have some more memes, Liz.
Indeed. But going back to her negotiations in Russia, Truss was widely panned for a series of spectacular gaffes. And as the Moscow Times reported, which is an independent Russian news source, the British embassy in Moscow was forced on Thursday to clarify a series of remarks made by Foreign Minister Liz Truss during a tense meeting with her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. In the closed-door meeting, Lavrov had asked Truss whether the UK accepted that two Russian regions, Voronezh and Rostov, belonged to Russia, and that Russia had the right to move troops and equipment to the areas. According to Russia's Kommersant Business Daily, Truss replied that the US will never recognize Russian sovereignty over these regions.
Those are Russian Federation territory.
They've been Russian for centuries.
Like the Russian Federation territory, not Ukrainian.
Yes.
So, okay, she just doesn't know what he's saying, presumably.
No, she thought they were referring to Donetsk and Luhansk, clearly, and she was quickly corrected by the British ambassador in the meeting. So I'm glad there are some adults in the room.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that was a trap laid there by the Russian guy. She's like, I want to see what she knows.
Yeah, nothing is the answer.
Or at least on that.
But it also implies that she went there with the posture of basically deny everything, saying, no, we'll never do this, never back off, no, and not to, I don't know, what's the word, negotiate?
Have a chat.
Yeah. She had previously confused the Baltic Sea with the Black Sea, 700 kilometers away. Why is it that our foreign secretary lacks a basic grasp of geography? Well, let's think about that. After the meeting, Lavrov refused to shake Truss's hand and apparently described the meeting as like a mute talking to the deaf. And I think this is emblematic of our approach towards Russia. We have been ignoring their repeated concerns about NATO expansion and interference and subversion in Ukraine for many years. Perhaps instead of playing tough and taking photos, we could have actually listened and talked, actually negotiated, and actually potentially avoided a war that is killing many Russians and Ukrainians.
You could argue this, but you could also argue, of course, that we've been kind of deaf on their advances. I mean, like the taking of Crimea, the two territories, of course, as well, and then, well, just poisoning people when they try to run for president or anything else. I'm not saying I agree.
That is a good point, but there is a problem that a lot of commentators are beginning the discussion of this issue with the occupation of Crimea, which was in fact directly precipitated by the coup against the pro-Russian president, which was sponsored, and we have this on record, I'll be reporting about it later this week, sponsored by the US State Department and aided and abetted. So it depends where you draw the lines to this conflict. Basically, there have been some bad people involved all across on all sides, and I think yes, I'm not exculpating Russia or Putin of blame because they are. I mean,
they're the ones actually invading with troops and taking territory.
You know,
so okay, right. that is not to be mentioned.
Absolutely. But you may be wondering how we got here with these gaffes. How does a country that used to rule a quarter of the world's land area find itself a foreign secretary with a D in geography? Well, let's take a look. Have you heard of this thing?
Conservative A-list. Oh, is this the diversity hiring?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I did. I remember mentioning this in the video on parliamentary procedures. David Cameron was just like, yeah, I want diversity hires because I'm an idiot. Because Labour did this and they got terrible female candidates who are still an embarrassment to this day. And he was like, yeah, I want some of that. So.
And his rationale for it was, but that'll make us look more trendy and more modern if we've got more non-white people, more minorities, more women, and so on and so forth.
Yes, but you then end up with Diane Abbott. That's like...
Or Liz Truss.
Oh, is she an A-list candidate?
Oh, yes.
Oh, for being a woman, I presume.
Yes.
Right.
This is the Conservative Party's version of a diversity hire. In the run-up to the 2010 elections, Cameron compiled a shortlist of prioritised trendy candidates. In April 2006, a Conservative Party committee on candidates was set out to deliver a promise by David Cameron to transform the Conservative Party at Westminster into something that's not conservative. The committee reduced 500 aspiring politicians on the party's list of approved parliamentary candidates to an A list of between 100 and 150 priority candidates. The result was a list on which more than half of the names were women. Interesting. It's not quite as bad as Labour's all-female shortlist, but it's not far off. This shows the extent to which the ideology of affirmative action, diversity and inclusion has undermined meritocracy and produced laughably inept politicians to fill the highest ranks of government. So who else do you think was on this list? Let's have a guess. What luminaries?
Anna Soubry.
Yes.
Damn it, I knew it.
So Anna Soubry, for those who don't know, was the fanatical Remainer who left the Conservative Party to start the Independent Group for Change and was promptly booted.
Cuck Party.
Yes. And what happened to her at the next election? Can you remember?
Wow, wow.
Yeah, she was booted out of her seat by the electorate, which is what should happen. Anyone else you can think of?
Oh, God.
Perhaps slightly less controversial? Perhaps in higher places of government?
No, it's not going to be Theresa May. She's too old for that.
No.
I have no idea.
So we have Baroness Warsi.
Okay.
Saida Warsi is now in the House of Lords. And Priti Patel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Interesting.
I wonder how she feels about being the diversity hire. Because she said some pretty base things about those problems in the past.
Yeah, maybe it's a burning resentment she feels, or maybe it's a version of pulling up the ladder. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm gone now. Right, bye.
Yeah. So perhaps if we had a competent set of ministers chosen on merit rather than promoted through identity politics, the world wouldn't be quite such a shambles. But yeah, I do agree with your point there. Obviously, I'm not trying to say, it's Liz Truss's fault entirely that there's war in Ukraine, because that's ridiculous, right? But she is one factor. She's one of the cogs in this enormous, complicated issue that has completely failed.
Could have been better.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
You could imagine if you replaced her with someone who was competent, an actual statesman who could go there and negotiate and not just look tough and take photos.
Who knew where Rostov was.
Right. Yeah, who even knew what the territories were that they were talking about, then maybe we would have had a better outcome.
If you enjoyed that section from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series on history that Bo does, and this one, the most recent, being part 4 of the series he's doing on World War I with special guest Apostolic Majesty. And if you'd like to find out what else is coming out on the website, you can always follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.